Welcome to the Impact Days 2021 Prelude. We are live here from the hybrid stage at Impact Hub Vienna. Thank you for joining us online and also here in the room. My name is Lena Gansterer and I'm the Partnerships Director of Impact Hub Vienna. I have been also the host of every CE Impact Day or Impact Days since the very beginning. Many of you here in the room and maybe some of you online still know the name CE Impact Day, the initial name of the event. Today we present you a new face. It's the Impact Day since 2 years, and since today it has also a new face, a new visual identity. This comes in time, of course, with our changing formats as well. We have to adapt to our current times, and this year we host the very first hybrid event. As the impact investment field in Austria advanced, so did the Impact Days evolve. Unfortunately, we couldn't host the Impact Days in 2020, nor could we host the Impact Days in the form we initially wanted in 2021. However, we couldn't wait any longer to host the conversations that matter, and therefore we are hosting the Impact Days this year in September again, 9th and 10th of September. We will talk about that much more later. And today is a first prelude to that. A teaser, or maybe a very sophisticated rehearsal for some of us. It reminds me also very much of the very first event that we have hosted in Impact Hub Vienna about impact investment. Again, or for the first time back then, also with Charly, Kleissner and Andreas Treichl. I think it was the first encounter between the two, at least for our community. And it was the very first event about impact investment, at least in Austria. In a way, the dialogue back then was also a prelude to the Impact Days, or the first CE Impact Day in 2012, a couple of months later. Today, the same people behind the event, back then and today, are still working together. They came together around a vision. And the same two men are on stage. Impact investment has been, still is, and will always be a personal decision. It is an approach to how one takes decisions, and it is the very personal decision to align your investments with your values, with your impact objectives. 10 years ago, the conversation was much about bringing awareness to Austria, making people aware of this opportunity, about a field that was slowly emerging in different parts of the world. Today, we can discuss what has happened since. We can assess and evaluate what experiments have worked out and which didn't. We can look at how far we have come as individuals, as people, as a community, as societies. We can have a conversation about what the future will bring and where we have to go next. We can look at the systems surrounding us and what role we play in them. Today, Charly and Andreas will share some of their reflections, and we will invite you to also share yours. While reflecting, it is important that we look at ourselves and ask us what do we want to see in the world. When I look back, 10 years ago, I joined Charly, Nikolaus, Hinak, and Alexis, some of you know who I talk about, to found the Investment Ready program. It was the very first accelerator program privately run in Austria, also the very first accelerator program for social entrepreneurs, and talking about impact investment. It was a very odd decision. No one understood what I would do back then. It was a bit of a risky endeavor. We didn't have a financial plan at all. But today, we see many people join our field. It's not an odd decision anymore. It's rather, I would say, it became popular. I consider the growth of the social entrepreneurship field as one of our successes as a community. We achieved that together with all of you. We have seen over 500 social entrepreneurs, and we hosted countless conversations around social entrepreneurship, about impact investment and the impact economy at large. We created a home, a base for anyone who wanted to join and to bring solutions to the world, to connect and to collaborate. We have seen the Impact Hub network grow from around 10 back then, to more than 100 locations worldwide. In the last 10 years, when I look at the impact investment field in Austria, I have seen people like Uli Grabenwarter. He is the Deputy Director of Equity Investments at the European Investment Fund. Some of you know him because he is the person that didn't miss a single Impact Days event. He committed here at the Impact Days to an idea and he followed through. And I saw many people do that. He back then said he wants to support the impact investment field top down. And actually a few years later, he created the first fund of funds for impact funds and leveraged a lot of capital to flow into the market. I have seen Charly investing in many entrepreneurs, early stage businesses, bottom up, and inspiring other investors to do the same. I have seen Erste Banks advancing the social banking field in Austria and in the CE region. I have seen all Austrian funding agencies, like the Vienna Business Agency, to open calls for impact innovations. I have seen the launch of the first impact fund here in Austria firsthand. And I have seen also the European Commission to open all sorts of calls to support positive impact and the Green Deal. I have seen entrepreneurs from all walks of life to open their businesses and create impactful innovations. I have seen experienced people advise and support these entrepreneurs, and I have seen young talents join them. I have seen my younger sister and their friends, her school and university friends, go to Fridays for Future events. I have seen a lot of positive impulses. I have seen a lot of positive energy and a lot of positive change. And yet, what has really changed? Are we better off today than 10 years ago? I at least grew in the last 10 years, and I will grow another baby. So let's see what the next 10 years will bring for the future generation. I'm looking forward to hearing from Charly what he has observed and experienced. He is a pioneer of the impact investment movement worldwide and an impact investor himself. Charly, as an investor, as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, and as a global citizen, what do you see?
Well, okay, I almost see everybody, but not quite, so I have to move a little bit. Hello. It's so great to be here, and thanks for reviewing the last 10 years. It seems long on one side, but then really short on the other side, right? And I'm so happy and honored to be here to celebrate with you and reflect a little bit, but also challenge ourselves to see what we have to do together, to move forward. And so I have prepared a few remarks here. And what I will try to do is start out sharing with you why I believe we are in this multi-systemic crisis that has been unfolding for some years now. I also share where I think we are with respect to understanding that we have problems, but not understanding what to do about them. And I will share as I see the consciousness and awareness actually emerging, which will be necessary in order to do the changes that we need to do. So those are the three topics that I would like to share my thoughts on. So why are we in this multi-systemic crisis? We are at the beginning of a major, unprecedented global transformation. I think I need to stand in front of this, right? Not here. I'd like to move, but yeah. And this crisis started already. And we need to figure out, humanity needs to figure out how we can move from a very unsustainable path to a very sustainable path, not only economically, but also socially and environmentally and spiritually. And that transformation will require a massive change of all the systems that we're used to. And not only the education system, not only the medical system, the healthcare system, but more fundamentally, the economic system and the financial system. And those are the most stickiest systems on the planet. So COVID-19 has shown us sometimes brutally the design flaws of many of these systems. It has shown us that our medical system does not really work, that our global supply chains, particularly with respect to food, Lena, are not optimized for actually bringing good food to everybody. They're optimized to making the most profit for all the intermediaries. And it has shown us the structural and systemic design flaws that result in massive inequality, massive social injustice, and lack of time to address climate change in time in order not to create a very unlivable planet. But COVID-19 is not the root cause of what's going on in the economic system. It's a symptom of what's going on. It's a symptom of the unsustainability of our systems that we have created and that we are able to change if we so choose. So, what is wrong with the system and what caused these major disruptions like COVID-19? Well, on the economic side, I think three main things come to my mind. One, not in priority order, is that these systems are based on the fallacy of eternal exponential growth. Now, you don't need to be a mathematician to understand that that's not a possibility on a planet with finite resources. And yet, we pretend that that's how it's going to work. Even very accomplished economists pretend that this is going to be how it goes. We all know from our personal lives, from our communities, from our families, that that is not an option. Now, maximizing financial profits at the expense of everything else is a consequence of that exponential growth fallacy. Now, economists, most of them, not all, but 90-95%, they conveniently call the issues, the systemic issues that we're grappling with as humanity, as externalities, external to the system. Injustice, poverty, the difficulty of managing climate change, externalities. And they pretend as if the markets would actually magically fix it. We cannot accept that anymore, right? So let's change that. What needs to happen to change that? Well, we need to change the economic system to put positive and negative externalities at the center of the system, not as an add-on, as CSR, as ESG. Those are all add-ons. We got to fundamentally change the system such that it is not managed according to an old, antiquated theory that's called modern portfolio theory on the investment side. It has nothing to do with modern, and has nothing to do with system change, has nothing to do with either positive or negative impact. And we don't have an alternative, so we're making it up as we go, because the establishment is thinking still that it will fix itself. Well, look around, it's not, right? So that's what's wrong with it. And so the system is reacting on that, including the financial system. What are they doing? They're inventing ESG, environmental, social, and governance criteria. Beautiful. ESG is better than non-ESG. Now, if you decide to make a lot of money investing in weapons, which is a really good investment on the financial side, then I bet that you would make even more money investing in a weapons manufacturer that has a great ESG score. Beautiful, diversified board, pays its employees a lot of money, and maybe even using green steel. But we could never invest in that, right? And so ESG is good. It's better than non-ESG. And if you would like to make a change on the systemic level, then you also need to go deeper on your investment portfolio. Otherwise, even if 100 trillion, all the money in the world, would move into ESG today, the rich would get richer, the financial institutions would make more profits, the social injustice would increase, and we would not mitigate climate change. So in the liquid portions of your portfolio, ESG is great. Push for ESG plus and ESG plus plus. However, if you also want to contribute to changing the systems, you need to go deeper than that. And so that's where I go into what we can do about this. Doing fine, yeah. So, like I said, when I go around these days, I don't have to convince many people that we are in trouble, that our systems don't work. Even the financial systems, they say, yes, 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 it's not working. Where we differentiate, where we differ, is actually that they think that they are part of the solution, and I think they're part of the problem, which is great. Then we can have a debate, right? And say why that is. Innovator's dilemma is hard to overcome. And so in my opinion, we need to radically rethink along the lines that I just mentioned before, the economic system and move it towards what I would call deep impact. I was inspired by Andreas, a Norwegian, who in 1972 coined the terminology deep ecology. And I looked him up because it spoke to me. And I was not familiar with deep ecology. But when I read up, the way that he described deep ecology versus ecology was a non-anthropocentric view of ecology, a non-human-centric view of ecology, meaning that humanity is not at the top of the food chain. We do not have the authority to mess up everybody else just in order to satisfy our own needs. And that spoke to me, because when I reflect on deep impact and I think about how do we invest, if we invest just with our brains, we will not be able to go deep because our brains are not deep. Our humanity is deep. And if you start analyzing what your brain serves you, and I have a brain that has a PhD in computer science from the TU Wien, right? And it knows how to segment, it knows how to partition, it knows all these things. And I observe it with curiosity and wonder, and yet I know that it's portraying all these images that are not really true. And if you go deeper and you reflect on what's really true, then you discover your humanity. If you just invest with your brain, you will not be able to go deep. If you just invest with your heart, you will lose all your money, because compassion doesn't care about money, right? But if you invest with your soul, then by default it's more than your ego, right? It's not just for your family, it's for humanity and the planet. So deep impact economy is based on systemic change with an awareness and a consciousness that actually realizes that we have the responsibility to do something about it, not just with our brains. We know what to do, actually. The principles of resiliency, circularity, regeneration, regionality, we all know that they need to be deployed, right, at the center of the economy. No question about that. So why do we not do it? Well, because of the awareness and the consciousness, because we are not courageous enough to demand change from our politicians, to elect different ones, to influence each other in saying, hey, are we really standing for this? And it's hard because our systems are all over us, right? And yet we have to do that in order to make a change. So if we just try to do systems change with our heads, with our brains, we will fail, predictably. If we do it in conjunction with our awareness and consciousness, we have a chance to actually do it. So the good news is that there's things happening on the consciousness and awareness side. The emergence, right? Which I've been waiting for some time. And so, I mean, I get to talk to a lot of very conscious people. And just in the last few weeks, I got to help the Impact Hub Treichl, where I'm from, get off the ground. Yes, 10 years later, we'll see how they're going to do. I told them I look forward to the 10-year anniversary. I'm just coming here. And Zurich is doing its 10-year anniversary. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful community. And I was teaching at an Oxford executive training for executives from all over the world who want to know how to lead more consciously, right? Being a human as opposed to just a manager, and challenging their own assumptions about the enterprises that they manage. I love private gatherings where people really self-select to come. I was in South Tyrol at a biodynamic winery, and the entrepreneur there invited 25 of their colleagues who are also doing businesses and wanting to convert to biodynamic and all of that. Beautiful, right? So they're ready to do something, not just talk about it. I was attending a family office conference that added the Impact Day. Beautiful, wonderful. Let's do that more often. And next geners. I love to talk to next geners because they are going to be the ones who actually have to live with the mess that we leave them and try to get out of it, right? And that's going to be tough. And so now is the time to actually prepare for that and build the leadership and the consciousness to do that. And I'm talking to high-tech accelerators who made some money like I did in high-tech and want to move into impact. Finally, I wish Silicon Valley would do that. They are now a little bit. So I went back to Silicon Valley 3 years ago, to insert myself again. And now I'm working on the intersection of impact and technology and consciousness, right? And maybe later, Andreas and I can talk about what that has to do with the financial system, technology and consciousness, right? And I get to talk to female wealth owners who have a lot of money, right? And are wondering about what to do with that. So you see, all these are examples that it's happening all over. I don't know if it's going to happen fast enough. Nobody knows. That's beyond my brain to understand. But we got to do it. So, and within Tonic, these circuits are happening, and we're co-creating that, together. So these beautiful circuits, archetypal communication patterns of people who really care and who really are vulnerable in order to explore who they are, what their relationship is with wealth, what is enough, what their contribution to the existing system is, and how they benefit from the existing system. So those are difficult questions to ask, right? And unless we ask them, we will not be able to make progress. It has to hurt a little bit in order to make progress. And you're all here to do that too. So I'm going to wrap up now, doing fine on time, with two thoughts. One is going to be my brainy thought, and the other one is going to be my human thought. So the brainy thought is, can't resist that, is talk about systems one more time. So we know that systems change under pressure, but only under pressure. And if the pressure is not big enough, they don't change, right? And so I think that the pressure that humanity put on the biosphere with our fossil fuel energy forces the system on a planetary scale to respond with climate change. Now, once a system starts changing, it's very difficult to get it back. As a matter of fact, system change tells us it's impossible. You cannot recreate, the original state of the system. And so the system will eventually reach a new state of equilibrium, and that could be either very comfortable for us or very uncomfortable for us, right? And so it's up to us to see how we can adapt that. But the train left the station. There's nothing more that we can do except for actually steering it now. And that whole notion of going back to business as usual intellectually doesn't make sense, and from an emotional standpoint doesn't make sense at all, because who would want to go back to a system that created these injustices and inequalities in the first place? Why? I don't get that discussion, but I think that people might confuse their own comfortableness with talking about systems. And let me end with going back to the consciousness, since you cannot really do anything meaningful without being aware of it. So I believe that the expression of my life's work is a direct consequence of who I am, not who I think I am, which is my brain, right? But who I am. And so being detached from the outcome is different than thinking you are detached from the outcome. And that's a very, very important distinction. And that comes then with responsibility. I cannot escape the fact that if that is really true for me, that I have the responsibility of taking this change seriously and act on it. And I believe that humanity's trajectory is a direct expression of humanity's consciousness. And right now, it doesn't look that great. It's up to us to change it, right? And to see what our contribution will be, such that humanity will be more aware of its destiny and that we become architects co-creators and co-imaginators of that beautiful trajectory, as opposed to letting things happen that we have set in motion that are negative. In conclusion, I want to just say that you know probably that we're in trouble. Many don't know what we need to do about that. I made the point, hopefully, that we all have the responsibility to help evolve our consciousness and awareness. And we all have the responsibility to act now with our life choices, our consumption, and our finances. So, finances. What does that all have to do with the future of finance? And I almost brought it into 25. That's good. So, I'm honored to introduce my friend, Andreas Treichl. Andreas, can you please join me here? We chose a couch for our conversation, appropriately. Andreas is the chairman of the supervisory board of the Erste Foundation, and he is the president of the European Forum Alpbach. So we met 10 years ago, Andreas. And I still remember it in your office. And we talked about impact already, right? Mm-hmm. And you talked about your bank and your career a little bit. And I asked you, what do you want to be when you leave your banking career? And you know what your answer? Do you remember what your answer was at that time?
I'm not sure, no.
You said you want to be like me. So how are you doing on that, Andreas, now 1.5 years after you left the CEO position of the Erste? How are you doing on that?
I'm coping with it. What really astonished me was the fact that my stepping down as CEO of Erste immediately triggered the pandemic. I actually,
that's a big impact.
I told you at that time too. I had wanted to step down from the CEO position in Erste a lot earlier. I thought that in 2007, 10 years being the CEO is enough, and I had founded the foundation. So I always wanted to be chairman of the foundation, because I think you can have more impact in a foundation than you can have in a bank. And then the financial crisis came, and I had to prolong my stance for about 12 years. So now I'm actually where I wanted to be.
Are you missing it?
No, not a second.
Being at the
not
top
a second.
of
No,
your
it
game?
gave me. I learned so much during the last year and a half. And I think the biggest frustration for me in the 23 years as CEO was, and why I envied you so much, was the fact that I had no time to learn and to think. And now I have a bit more time to learn and to think. And I feel well. I rather have more money in the foundation. Unfortunately, we had dividend restrictions from the ECB. But it will come back, and we can have great impact and do a lot of good things together. But you had some problems too during those 10 years, right?
Especially the last 3 years, and I think health is important, right? And I had to face death actually with a bad sort of cancer, lymphoma, and I had like an 80% chance of dying within a year. That was like 2 years ago. And that's why I said detachment from your own life is an interesting exercise, that if you have to do it and you take it as a learning opportunity, then what really matters comes into focus, right? And that's when I reconfirmed my own personal commitment to the deep impact side with an awareness that life is actually very finite, and might as well enjoy it too while you have it.
I remember I was incredibly, in two ways, very impressed about you handled the situation, because having talked to you in those years and then thinking about the fact maybe this is the last time I had talked to you when I hung up the phone, is a tough thing to think about, and it shows you, what's really important.
Yeah. It shows you what's really important, right? And I think stepping off the treadmill, like I've done when I was 45 from in Silicon Valley, right? Where especially for men, I think it's not done very often, right? And you did the same thing now, a little bit delayed, but
45, 65, who cares?
So Andreas, when you think about what I shared, what are some of the comments, maybe, or challenges, or nuanced opinions that you might have about some of the topics, that I talked about?
What you talked about is nothing I can disagree with. I'm trying to sort of limit myself to one part of what you're talking about, and trying to have an impact on that front. And that is, I've decided for myself, I can't operate worldwide. I want to concentrate on Europe. I want to concentrate in everything what I do on financial health, because I believe that is the second most important thing after physical health. And I agree with the things you say, but I think you leave out one really important point, which is, I think, one of the big conundrums that we experience, particularly during the last years, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the problem, which is that you have science advancing at a very rapid pace. You have even business, I think, advancing at a very rapid pace. Education. There are a couple of areas that are completely locked down. One is politics, and that's really important. So I think the whole sphere of politics is not advancing. They're stuck.
Yeah.
And how can they actually be able to cope with the speed of the environmental change, with the speed of the technological change, when the quality of politics is not improving themselves? The quality of business is improving, the quality of science is improving dramatically. It's basically two or three professions.
Well, you know where I live, right? I live in California. And the last 4 years in the US, talking about political stress and challenges, right? It was really hard, especially in California, where we're not really pro the orange guy, right? and yet, my response to that is that societies get the politicians they deserve, unfortunately. And so, which is a harsh statement.
That's a very harsh statement, yeah.
Yeah. And yet, that's why I make the argument about awareness and consciousness, because it's my strong belief that if we were to demand, politicians that understand what we care about, then they would appear almost like the market, supply and demand. Yeah. Or do you think that there's something else that we can do? If we elect the politicians who don't understand where we try to go, I'm not surprised that they don't support our agenda.
But I think we just had, during the last 3 years, a wonderful example of what needs to happen in order to get politicians to move and to act, and that's the Friday for Future movement. That has really managed to change I'm not sure whether it actually has changed the perception of politicians, but they appear to change their perception. Some of them.
Kind of like ESG.
Simply because they have to. They have realized that it is absolutely impossible these days to win an election if you don't turn green. So even you have nationalistic parties now who are completely untruthful in sort of thinking about that they actually care about the environment. Maybe they care about the Hungarian environment, but not the environment of all the people. But they have to because the young people demand it.
The young people demand it. But that comes back to, if you demand it, right, then they have to act. Now that you got us into politicians, let's move on a little bit. How about into a space that I'm more comfortable with, technology? And you're a banker. And so our son, Alex, he's working at a digital bank called Chime and in San Francisco. And they got financed last fall about 500 million investment at a market cap of 15 billion. What's the market cap of Erste Group today? I'm sure you know.
15 billion.
That's what I thought. I looked it up too on my way to prepare. So the market believes, we can talk about what we believe. The market believes that type of bank and digitalization is the future today.
Yeah.
And so, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, digitalization, and COVID has massively accelerated that. But then there is, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and all the modern technologies that will have to be or are being integrated massively into the financial system. What's your view on that, and how do you see Europe actually successfully doing that as part of creating the future for finance?
Well, I think finance is a very good place to talk about the impacts of digitization and all the new technologies. So are other industries. And what is true in the financial sector is also true in the automotive sector.
Yeah.
If you look at Tesla vis-a-vis Toyota or Volkswagen,
on that one I have to interrupt you because when I talk to the BMW folks, then they compare themselves to Elon Musk wrongly.
Yeah.
Because Elon Musk is building software that has wheels versus they build an old car.
I'm not completely agreeing with you because I drive a BMW.
Is it electric?
Well, I think
they don't understand.
That's one of the big problems. So if you go on that front, Tesla has one big advantage.
Yeah.
It has no legacy.
Yeah.
So Tesla is, in my view, highly overvalued. But I'm totally okay with it. It's fun. I haven't invested in it, so I didn't make money, but my sons did. So they're valued at 28, 30 times book. And Volkswagen, Toyota, or Mercedes can be lucky if they trade at 1.5 times book. That's pretty much the same thing in the financial services industry. JP Morgan is a fantastic bank that makes a lot of money. Is traded at 1.5 times book, and any digital shop is trading at multiples like boom, boom, boom. Why is that? Because they don't have legacy systems. But there is, I think, particularly now the COVID crisis has shown the limitations of digital banks. Digital banks can only do so much. They can cover 90% of your requirements. So we have a pretty good platform in Erste. You can do practically everything on George. But you cannot talk with George about a problem that you have because you're in the COVID crisis, you're locked down for 6 months, and you need somebody who advises you what is the best way to get Fixkostenzuschüsse, Garantien, or so on.
So that's the limitations of artificial intelligence,
exactly.
right? While maybe 90% of financial services, or whatever percentage, a majority of today's financial services will be automated by AI, the human component will not be automated for some time to come, right? Which is a great way maybe to... How does that have anything to do with ethics and how to, there's these ethics banks and AI and ethics. And
I think it has in two ways it has to do with banks. I think that the financial services industry overall, including all the digital, is going to be dying during the next 30 or 40 years if they don't change entirely to switching from we're not around to sell financial services and products. We're here to make sure that we create financial health, financial well-being for our clients. That's our job. And that's so remunerating bank employees for how much they sell is a piece of shit. And that's still done in most financial institutions. You have to stop that, and you have to go back and really think about what is the value of a bank. And the value of a bank is to take care of the second most important thing in people's life. And if you do a good job on that, then you can make money with it. But if you do a bad job on that, you should be locked down. And banks have made huge mistakes during the past decades. And if they don't change, banking will probably become a digital business. And imagine that the second most important thing in life is being taken care of purely digitally. And until we have to get into artificial intelligence and singularity, it probably will last a couple of years still. So we have to do something over the next 50 to 100 years. And people's advice, people are still needed. Not very often,
yeah.
but 3 or 4 times a year. If you have a problem, you want to talk to somebody.
I couldn't agree more. There's so much fluff going on, particularly in Silicon Valley a few years ago about AI and overhyping it. And Elon is one of the overhypers, in my opinion, because he leaves out the human consciousness conveniently, right? And the human touch. And pretends as if the brain could be reenacted with a computer, which is kind of absurd, right? But what about, you talked about banks, but I'm thinking about more the holistic financial system, and particularly in Europe. So I'm bi-continental, so I understand the US system a little bit and a little bit the European system. And, in the global context of China, of a bipolar world, right? And of China and the US controlling most of the AI, either from state-sponsored algorithms or from algorithms that white people develop in white companies.
Yep.
And what about Europe? So in that context, what's the, let's talk about, beyond banking, the future of Europe in that context, because I know, I have the privilege of working with you a little bit on Alpbach Forum, and so I know that you care about that and you think about that a lot. And I care about it because I want to bring the impact thing into European focus, because in my opinion, Europe would be uniquely qualified to go deep on impact vis-a-vis China or the US.
Yeah. I think Europe has a much bigger problem than we all believe. And that's not a negative statement. I mean, the real issue for Europe is that if you want to solve a problem, you have to accept that you have a problem. And Europeans are not really willing to accept that they have a problem. And it's very tough.
What are the problems?
One of the problems is, which really, honestly, sorry, the word pisses me off, is that if we don't change in Europe, we are at a disadvantage vis-a-vis the US and China in the long run.
What do we have to change?
We have to become a lot more entrepreneurial.
I totally agree.
We have to become a lot more young people oriented.
What's holding us back in Europe on the entrepreneurial scene? People ask me all the time, can we do a Silicon Valley here? I said, no, Silicon Valley is there. It's there. What we need to do here is here, right?
You cannot. There was a wonderful thing yesterday. There was an education tech company in Austria that became, which basically was Nachhilfestunden. But they got a valuation of 1.4 billion. It's wonderful. So they're a unicorn. But if you look who invested in the C round in this company, they're all American or Chinese companies. That's really tough, number one. Number two, the event that we had yesterday, we need three of them a day, every day. Every day we need.
So one of the problems is that there's not enough finance to finance European companies.
Well, we don't have a capital market in Europe. We're dependent on banks. Banks control Europe. 80% of Europe is financed by banks. That in itself is a huge problem, and we have to change that. And the second problem that comes out of it, that all the new industries, everything that's digital, everything that's AI, everything that's blockchain, is to an enormous amount intangible. So think about the industry foundations in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, automobile, pharmaceuticals, steel, aluminium, and so on and so on. Always very, very big fixed asset investments. Now it's all intangible investment. And banks are not fit to finance intangibles because you can't secure it. I can't take your body as a security.
Well, you can if you tokenize it, and that brings me to the modern world of finance.
Tokenization of Charly Kleissner.
That's right. It's like tokenization of the Mona Lisa, right? And non-fungible tokens.
I'm going to call you NFT from now on.
NFT, Charly NFT. So I do believe that unicorns are great, but if you think about the deep impact economy, unicorns and private equity and venture capital is not necessarily the correct financing mechanisms for sustainable long-term impact.
Right.
And I think that now stay with me a little bit on a visionary thing, because we talked about digitalization on one level, but if you could actually digitalize impact, the positive and the negative impact, and you could create a market around that, That's called tokenization of impact. And if there is a market around that, then you can do all the financial engineering that we know of in order to securitize it, to actually do, for future markets and all that. But it will be on impact as opposed to on pure speculation like Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin has nothing to do with any value. It's just pure speculation. So instead of using blockchain and AI to do a Bitcoin, which is just speculation, I would like to use it to do impact tokenization. And what about, but I have to go, since I'm doing that with a couple of projects, because it's at the confluence of consciousness, technology, and impact, but I have to go to Switzerland to do it. So a non-European, a non-EU country, because I cannot do it with Erste Bank. They're not the custodian for these assets, to your point, digital assets, and I'm interested in digital impact assets.
Yeah, you're right.
I would like to do that here. Yeah. What about regulations? I mean, that brings up the regulations which drive me nuts, okay? So I have to, and we should regulate, to be more productive as opposed to hinder it. What's your, I know you have a strong opinion on that. Maybe.
It has good and bad sides.
Yeah.
The good thing about regulation is the GDPR is a good thing.
Yeah.
Data protection is a very good thing. The bad thing is that there's only one thing for the moment that Europe is really leading in, and that's regulation. And that works really good. But what you said, I think, is one of the most interesting developments overall, and I fully agree with you. I'm not sure whether Bitcoin is pure speculation, but it's definitely not a currency. It's an investment that offers you some freedom of state influence if you want to. I don't like it either, but I'm okay. I like Ether a lot more than that. But what you said is blockchain. Mm-hmm. And Bitcoin did a bad job for blockchain because it turned blockchain into a tool that helped to create Bitcoin. And what you said in your speech, and that is the key, is that we live in a world where in trade, the middlemen make a lot more money than the producers. And the consumers pay for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chains of middlemen. The wonderful thing about blockchain is the profit, if you can have it. The profit goes to the producer, and the consumer pays a lot less, and you leave out all those profit-oriented. So if the profit of a banana goes actually to the farmer, that would be wonderful. Now, in the meantime, 90% of the profit of a banana goes to the traders. And that is the one. So blockchain is a deeply political thing and a democratic thing. It would create, if we can really manage to bring it to all chains of the economy.
That's the vision of the original engineers that did blockchain, which, by the way, did not come out of Silicon Valley. They came out of Venezuela, of Russia, out of Argentina. And they had this vision of massive democratization of all processes, right? By taking away the intermediaries. And now, China has co-opted blockchain to actually control its citizens, not to enable them to do what they want to do, which is interesting. And yet, so what is that? So if we were to, be able to then prove the impact via blockchain, right? Then you take away all that, you get to an auditing of impact. That's actually foolproof, right? Absolutely. And unless we actually change the impact industry, to include auditing on the impact side, we will not get too far, and then compensate people for that in the industry, right? And not only them, but if you tokenize the impact, then you can actually compensate, incentivize all the stakeholders, which goes beyond the private equity model and the venture model.
Far beyond.
And far beyond, and if you then actually incentivize the beneficiaries as well, right? But then the token folks need people like you who understand inflation, so you don't print too many tokens, and then you get inflation of impact, right? And so I think it's a nice convergence happening right now. Can Europe actually participate in that?
It could, but we need, but only fractionally, because we're not able to create a European data union, we're not able to create a European financial union, and we're not able to create a European capital market union. And you need a union if you tokenize it too. You need the same conditions everywhere. Yeah. And this is one of the key issues that we miss in Europe. That first of all, we're reducing our unity during the last 10 years. For the first time, a member left the European Union. If you talk about capital markets, what do you experience in Switzerland? If you think about capital markets, there are two countries in Europe that have one. That's England and Switzerland, and both are out of the EU. And now Germany is going to lead us into that future. Forget it.
What could we do in Austria?
In Austria? In Austria, the way we're going, we're going to sell it to Walt Disney Corporation in some years, or go in a joint venture.
That sounds Tyrolean.
And I will start. You're in a good place you're in a good place in Tyrol. You will, all your descendants will yodel and have lederhosen and take money in from rich Chinese or Vietnamese tourists.
So what about your vision of Central Eastern European as the old Habsburgian way of influencing and making sure that we, maintain the leadership and pull them with us? Doesn't have Austria a unique opportunity, just like Tyrol has on the Alpine region side? I have to say that, okay?
I think one of the problems that all the things that we're talking about is, in reality, it's nitty-gritty work for politicians. You need to change the legal systems. You need to change the data system. All things that require cross-regional and cross-functional cooperation. So you need all the ministries to work together. You need, in Central and Eastern Europe, all the Germans and the French and the Spanish to work together to achieve, to create conditions in Europe that allow us, for all the new technologies, to have the same common market that we had in the 60s for the steel industry. It's just a lot of work, and politicians are not going to do it because you don't win elections by doing that. So we need the young people to force politicians. They have to go out and say, we want it. And if you do not create the conditions for tokenization in Europe, for a data union, for a European capital market, for a European financial union, for a European this and that, if you don't do that, we will never vote for you again. But if they vote for those schmucks, we're not going to change them.
So I'm watching.
So we need a revolution, yes?
Yes. Which brings us to the closing. I watched the time. We have 2 minutes to sort of wrap things up, and we want to be on time to have more discussions here. So you already expressed the urgency, right? So how much time do we have? What can we do given the urgency of the matter? What are you going to do, personally and with your influence to get to a different outcome that you just mentioned?
Well, I can. All we can do is create a really strong civil society, and talk about those things, and meet and discuss and try to get media attention for that. Get people like you over here as often as possible who can motivate young people to move ahead, and we have to be a lot more forceful.
Forceful.
We have, we're trying to do that in Altbach this year. We said, we're not going to create a Friday for Future movement for tokenization or blockchain or capital markets or anything like that. But we can create a Monday for Future moment for that. And if we get to a Tuesday moment for future, if politicians really realize my voters want it, I have to act. I can't. I have to give up talking about bullshit like LGBTQI rights and things like that. Those are given things, and that is what makes me so angry. That all those things that are just normal. That we want to accept, we're not talking about it. We're making problems out of things that are no problems.
Well, it's important to have a discussion about our own biases and disadvantaged segments of our population. It's, that's a big discussion, and not only going on in Europe, but certainly in the US about, the African Americans and the structural and systemic disadvantages that they have suffered under for centuries, right? And I think it's important to have that. That's my opinion, to have that discussion.
Yeah, that is extremely important. Yeah. But unfortunately, we have the contrary in some of the European countries. where they're trying to take away the rights of certain people.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened in Hungary last week is such a shame. It's so abominable. And that such a country can actually continue to stay in the European Union, that is taking away the rights of homosexuals, that are putting homosexuals on the same level as whatever. This is so.
Uganda.
In a place where you have things like that, how do you want to talk about tokenization and getting the world forward? Huh? What are we talking about here?
Well, ultimately, I think that the people who knowingly and demonstrably contribute very negatively to what we agree on humanity should go to need to go to jail. And that's, and we're far away from that. People who are celebrated as philanthropists right now, who have contributed to the deniers of climate change, they are celebrated. They don't have to go to court, in order to be tried against crimes against humanity, which, in my opinion, they should. And so, transparency, and really pushing on real data and demanding to understand the positive impact and the negative impact, right? Yeah, is key. So I'm conscious of time. It was great. We just got into a nice space, Andreas, as always in our conversations. And I look forward to many, many, many more, and to collaborate, amongst many stakeholders, including your future. And I think the impact movement also needs you. So thank you for participating here personally. And I look forward to more conversations this morning and then in September.
Now that we've heard from Charly and from Andreas and their very honest and raw views on the future of finance, but also a multi-systemic crisis and how we can solve it and what this means for the world, we really want to go deeper. And we want to hear from more perspectives. And we want to hear from, most importantly, you. But before we get to that, I really want to introduce Angelika Dehlen, the head of Socially Responsible Investment at Mercer, and Alexa Zeremia, the co-founder and managing director of Impact Hub Vienna, who have just joined us on stage. But we're actually still missing the most important speaker of the day, which is you. So all our audience, both our virtual audience and our live audience here at the hybrid stage, can join the conversation via Slido. So you go to slido.com, so I encourage everyone to take out your phones, whether you're online or you're in the hub, and enter the conversation with the hashtag #ImpactDays. Our speakers and everyone who's in the room can also do this by checking the QR code that you see on your screens. And for our virtual audience, we've made this even easier. You can just scroll down, and right below your stream, you will see Slido. And you will see a chat function, a comment box, where we would really ask you to share your reflections, both on what Andreas and Charly were just discussing, and also what Angelika and Alexis will contribute now, and what our surprise speakers will also be sharing. Because as you can currently see, we have 2 empty chairs on stage, and they're waiting for the people in our audience. So we would actually really want to encourage you to, at any point, get up from the seat you're currently sitting on, walk on up, join us on stage, and at any point, share your reflections. This really is an open conversation where we want to host all voices on the future of finance and impact. And so we really want to hear everyone who's in the room and everyone who's joining us online. For everyone joining us online, I will be your voice in the room. So I have your answers right here on my tablet. So I will see what you're saying and contribute that to the conversation. So yeah, everyone in the room, feel free to join us on stage. Everyone virtually and in the room, feel free to join the conversation via Slido. But without much further ado, I would love to hand it off to the speakers who have already joined us on stage and ask you to share your reflections on what was just discussed and shared. And I want to throw one thing in, because that's kind of how the conversation between Andreas and Charly closed. And this is actually a question we already received from Slido, and ask you also, how can the average person contribute to the change of the current financial and economic system? The stage is yours.
Thank you. So plenty of topics have been discussed, and it's quite difficult to answer to all of it. Maybe starting with what can we do? And I think I would like to start the topic with change, transformation, and commitment. When I started to work on sustainability and moving, and I think that what Charly mentioned, the next step beyond ESG is impact, and impact will lead us to circular economy. And when I started to impact, the first reaction was, you ahead the future. I mean, it's coming, but we are too early. And what you have to say, and I think that's of course with their personal commitment, is really to say, there is no way that I'm not talking about it. So when I joined Mercer within the, asking me to develop the investment, because I'm coming from the asset management, I told the CEO, I'm happy to drive the business on the asset management, but only if I bring the impact with you. And that's, I think, it's key, because I don't think that it's true that humans are afraid of change. I have 2 girls. They're 9 and 10, and I can tell you it depends on the education. If I teach them not to be afraid of change, they will never fear change. They will welcome the change as a kind of experience. And something is happening between being a child and getting adult. And I think from the European point of view, and that's the biggest difference to the American one, we are afraid of failure and we are afraid of change. So it's a huge, I would say, need to start the communication about mindset. And when I started to work with Impact Hub, as I said, I'm coming really pure from the financial part, being on the asset management side. And really, and that's for every human, and we saw it right now with the pandemic, communication and social contact is key. And that's why I love to work with Impact, because we have with Impact Hub and the people and the entrepreneurs, it drives change. It opens mind, because you see different opinions, and you have the guys from the financial market very experienced on how to finance things, how to manage and develop things on the financial side. And then you have the young entrepreneurs who have the drive to change. And if you combine both worlds, I believe that we are able to change the mindset, but it's a lot of work, I have to say. Alexis, maybe your point on that.
I'll go back a bit to what the conversation triggered for me and where did it actually took me. And I think one of the biggest triggers was when Charly said every country has the politicians they deserve. And I was born in Romania in 1981, in communist Romania, with Ceausescu being our leader. So it made me think, like, what did we do wrong? What did we do wrong that we actually, what did I do wrong? What did my parents do wrong that we deserved Ceausescu as a leader? The other thing, and it's still, I don't know why, it kind of kept me going back to communism and to Romania and to transition, was the aspect of system change. It was a system. We grew up in a communist system that was working, functioning in a certain way. And overnight, in December '89, that whole system collapsed, right? The communist system just stopped from one day to the other into nothingness, more or less, right? So there was no new system ready there to just plug it in and make everything work. So it was a lot of chaos. We didn't have a banking law, I think, for several years. We didn't know what inflation really meant. I remember when my father, he started a company and he lost almost all the money when the inflation came later on. But everybody had hope, and everybody had a vision that something better is possible. And that took, that practically created, even though there was system change, even though there was uncertainty, even though there was unknown, it didn't matter because people had an image. I mean, that image.
You lost your mic.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can use that.
Yeah.
Okay. People had an image of a better life, of a better future, Of course, that better life, that better future was the American ideal that they sometimes saw in the movies, which we know it was not necessarily right now the most sustainable, but they had a vision. And that, I think, with that vision and that hope for a better life, all the difficulties that one had to go through in building up that system, creating that system, importing that system, kind of went away because of that, because of that vision, because of that hope. So I think, like, going back to where we stand right now, I feel that what we are missing in order to be able to go through this, it's really the image and the hope of what exactly the new movie fully looks like. And I believe that we need to start having more and more conversations maybe about building that image of how does it look like when it's not as fucked up as it is right now? How does it look like? How does it feel? How does life, work, interactions, money, everything, politics, how do they look like when it's better? Yeah, that's like the first point. And second, in terms of individual versus politics versus who should do what to change what, of course, as Impact Hub, we had the vision and the passion to create a space for individuals to follow their ideas and their intention to make this world a better place. That was the only thing that mattered for us. We looked at the world, we looked at ourselves as young people. We were in our 20s, all of us, when we started Impact Hub. We were just fresh from the banks of the university. I studied banking. I wrote my diploma on sustainable banking. But I felt that the change has to come with the individuals and with the new generation. And we believe that we ourselves and every human being, it's a value creator and not just a small piece in a large economic system where it needs to be productive and useful. So we wanted to create a space where people see each other as value creators and they do create value together. 10 years later, it grew and we brought together many different groups. We created collaborations, but I have more and more a feeling that it's not enough. Innovation and individual drive, and every time, like, having the feeling, like, it gives me the feeling always that I'm not doing enough. And I don't know what else to do anymore because I've been working on innovation, enabling change, enabling anything to the world to get better for the last years, and I'm running out of ideas. And I think it's not just with us as individuals. I think something much bigger has to happen. And I'm looking back at what Andreas said with the politicians, and I think the public sector per se, as a sector, we have a sector that is supposed to take care of our society, of our world, of us as human, us as public. There are politicians and there is public sector, and it's not about, and we always look and think, something they need to change or so, but I'm thinking much more lately, how can each of us contribute to develop a better public sector? Because in the end of the day, that public sector is supposed to take care of us, our world, our society, our children, our world. How can we not just look for changing people in politics, but how can we, each of us, start building up together a better public sector?
You're a brief. I briefly want to jump in and actually ask our audience. We're getting a lot of really awesome questions on Slido, but I would want to ask you, what are your views based on what Alexis was saying? What does this movie look like? What does this vision of the future look like? And what can we do? What can we do more to get there? And I would love to hear from you and hear your views, and I will share them with our speakers and with our audience as well. We do have a little bit of a controversial and provocative question in Slido, and I really want to ask it because I think it's important. Why are we waiting for young people to take to the streets? We are in a position to team up with other powerful people and speed up the change that we need. Yeah, civil society is important, but we will only be able to build a new system if we use our power within the current system to drive positive change. And I know this is something that all of you are actively working on within the systems that you're in, but maybe you want to speak more to this.
Yeah. So, well, that's a very, 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 very correct remark. I'm not saying that because as an old one, I want to move responsibility away from myself. I'm just saying that I don't. We can influence a lot. People like Charly and myself can influence a lot, but we are as individuals not interesting for a political party because we are a minority, and political parties only react when they have to go for a majority. They all want to go for a majority. So I think that the young people or whatever. If you saw that in the Friday for Future movement, I mean, don't tell me that some of the politicians I know in this region have any sympathy for the people who run Friday for Futures, but they're scared of them, and they see they have so many followers that they react. Politicians are not going to change their course because of Charly and myself, but if Charly and myself can come up with 50 million young people who go with us, we can change. We can change a lot.
So I agree. We should not wait for young people to take on the streets, but we should enable them and go with them.
What I wanted to say before, and what I love about this, is that the statement says team up with other powerful people. And basically what you're saying is the powerful people are you. The powerful people is the civil society as well. To a degree.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. We have our responsibility, but if we speak up and nobody follows, politicians are not going to react. So it needs both. I'm doing my part, and I'm doing my part to try to have lots of followers who will speak up with one voice to initiate political change.
And I think I want to key off of Alexis's point, which I did not get correctly. I think societies who elect their politicians, I forget that small sentence, which is a very important one because you didn't get to elect one. So the people who select politicians, they get the politicians they deserve, but not in the context of if you have a dictator.
You would say that's correct what you said, with the exception of Romania.
Yeah.
Because that's really an insult to the Romanian people.
Yeah. And I saw that, so sorry about that. I did not, I was incorrect. Yeah. Personally? Yeah. But I find it very absurd if people in democratic countries say, oh, this bad leader, right? That's what I was reacting to in a democratic country. It's whom we elected, hello, Yeah. 70 million Americans elected the orange guy again. Yeah.
And I think it's also about really taking responsibility, not only as an individual person, also as a CEO, CIO, head of or employee. I think it's really time to understand that freedom is taking responsibility, and you can only drive change if you take this lead. It's not about whether you're young or you're already, I would say, in the older generation who are giving the planet to the next one. It's about responsibility to drive the impact. And that's the part I'm really missing when I'm talking to clients. I see, and that's I agree with Andreas, Europe is driven by regulatory. And unfortunately, change is driven by regulatory. And that's, that's the, I would say, It cannot work because we need innovation should drive change and not regulatory because they're usually behind. So we need to find a way how to take responsibility together and drive change by innovation and not by regulatory in the financial sector.
I think here I have a follow-up question from our virtual audience who kind of say all these processes, and I think this is also what you're talking about when we speak about change, they need faster and agile decision-making. And in the regulatory framework that we're in, specifically the EU, will we succeed in that process? And if so, how?
Now I have to be quite, I think, you know, the disclosure is a first right step in order to compare financial products. Was it fast compared to the work the European Commission has done in the past year? Yes. Was it fast for us? No. So it's a quite difficult question. I think it's very difficult that you have so many countries, so many politicians, so many, I would say, financial market authorities to come up to speed up the process. And I think the lead is with the economy. I think, you know, it's the same what Andreas said, young people have a voice. Together we can drive the change. And I think, you know, if the business is coming out to drive impact, there is no way that the regulatory cannot or will not adjust. The same is true with the politicians. And based on the system we have right now, business and economy is key. So I think that's the first step we need to take in order to push and speed up a little bit. Otherwise, I don't think that we are fast enough. And I think what the pandemic shows that with medical healthcare, we're able to get this done. I don't think that achieving the SDGs or the climate change, even if we have super technology development, but we are not fast enough. So it has to be a common action between technology, science, politicians, and corporates, and of course individuals.
I'm sometimes wondering regarding what you said and the speed we can get with regulatory. And maybe again, coming back to my communist background, maybe maybe that's something that influences me because, like, you know, you can have, and there will be diesel, you're not allowed anymore to drive a diesel car, right, from, I don't know, whatever year in Europe. In the same way, we can have regulations to change and to forbid a lot of the things that we, and especially Charly, has been talking about, that we are now trying to build bottom-up from individual initiative, but which can be, in that sense, also forbidden, regulated, as something that harms the world. Same as you can go to jail for harming a person, the same way you can start going to jail for putting your money where you shouldn't put them, in something that harms ultimately the environment. I know I'm trying to be radical here and provocative, but I'm just wondering, in terms of speed of change,
I mean, if it's global,
that can be done overnight.
I mean, I'm not talking about jail, but it has to be global because what we see now, Europe has a lead on climate change, that's true. But I agree, if we are, it's a global problem. So it does not, and that's what I see on the investment side. So I can, of course, reduce my emissions. But what's happening right now, we are shifting, you know, it's outside the US, maybe driving to the emerging countries. And that will not solve the global issue of climate change, for example. So it still has to be, even if we are now having the lead, and hopefully we're able to keep it. I share the concern of Andreas with US and China. We need to make sure that it's not a European way of thinking, because it will not solve the global issue we're having to achieve the SDGs, because we're just, you know, transferring risk and issues to other countries, other regions of the world.
So we better all wait.
No, we can't wait. We need to do something.
Somebody has to take the lead. And I do, like, I would like to inquire into what is really the issue with US and China. Is it that we are like, they are going to be more powerful than us? Because you, Andreas, refer to as well, like, they own this company. And then I'm going again back to Romania, and it's like, after the revolution, Austria started buying almost everything in there, the main petrol company, the main banks.
I'm sorry, I did it. I'm sorry.
You know? And of course, from, oh my God, nothing belongs to us anymore, because the Austrians have it, perspective, you can say, well, you know, like this is really bad, like we don't own it anymore, they own it. But bottom line, it worked well, I think.
But what you're saying
For the investors.
it doesn't matter. It really does.
Like,
if Europe would work, it would really wouldn't matter at all whether the companies are owned by Austrians or Germans or Romanians. That's not really important if we had one European market.
So why would it be wrong if now the Chinese would own a lot of the Austrian companies?
Well, that depends on whether you have a view that Europe has not only a value in being a market, but that Europe has a value because we have certain values that the Chinese and the Americans maybe don't have.
Okay, so
and that is my concern. I don't want my kids to grow up in a world that is economically dominated by two political systems that are not necessarily the systems that I don't like. One I don't like at all. The other one I didn't like very much. Now I like it a little bit better. But I like actually the European system very, very much. But it has its flaws. So we have to make away with those flaws. And that we can only do if we become economically a lot stronger in the world than we presently are. And there are a lot of tools that we need for that. Now, we can influence a lot, but we need to influence politicians to do the work for us that we need in order to create one market for data and one market for all the new technologies that are in the world. I don't want to be dependent on Chinese IT clouds or American IT. I would love to have a European one, and we don't. And we got to get back. Europe was on a fantastic track from 1945 to about 2000, 2005. We were leading everywhere. We were peaceful, with the socially most balanced continent on this planet. We created the biggest consumer market in the world. We were exports in steel industry, in pharmaceutical, in everywhere. But since about 10, 15 years, that's over. And we just have to realize it's over and get back on track.
And I think instead of copying China or the US, Europe should lead in the impact economy, which is more compatible with the European way of not just philosophy, but the market economies that were created outside of Romania, in mainland Europe for a while. And so why not lead that, right? Because it's time to lead now. And instead of putting people to jail, how about first that they lose all their money if they invest in something bad, right?
Yeah.
So if we could actually make sure that people who invest in something good, proven good, they would make a lot of money. And if you invest in something proven bad, they would lose all their money. At that point in time, we would have actually turned the financial system upside down, because right now it's not working
Very
that
true.
way. Yeah. And Europe could march in that direction, social impact bonds, and then they don't work because they're too complicated. But tokenization and legislation to enable that would work counter to the Chinese way and the US way.
Our audience agrees, I have to say. We have Jakob Detering asking, as you said, we can't replicate Silicon Valley or Shenzhen, but what could a European version of such entrepreneurial hubs look like? And what would make it unique? And his suggestion is a focus on impact.
I think that's right.
Since we just had such brilliant suggestions and inputs from our audience, I again want to remind you, we still have 2 empty seats up here on stage. So feel free to come on over, take a seat. Selma, please come on over. We have Selma Prodanovic joining us. Thank you for being here. Please take a seat.
Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to listen to you in the conversation, and it's really great to be here on this event, to be live again. It's awesome. I would like to go back to what you said, Andreas. You said that the European market is like 80% focused or dominated by banks. And then at the beginning of the conversation, you said that you wanted to move from the bank to the foundation because you could make more impact or make more change with the foundation. So I'm wondering if you, as a good guy, has to move away from the bank to make more impact, and the banks are 80% dominated by banks. How can we motivate more bankers to stay in the bank and make the change in the bank?
So I tried. I can assure that my group will continue exactly what I did and move towards financial
I know
health.
you've been a pioneer in that field for many years.
But the thing is that you have to be incredibly consequential on that, and moving from being just a financial institution to a financial health or a financial well-being company is a big and complicated change. But you have to be consequential to the end that if you don't manage, if you fail on that, and other banks do not go that way, but prevail, that you go out of business. So it's so serious. If you want to change the financial system, you have to go the whole way. And then if you lose out, because banks who still sell silly products that people don't understand and make money on it, then you lost. But then you have to say to yourself, then I don't want to be in that business. And you need a lot of followers on that. That's the only way you can change it. That's the only way you can have impact. If you say, we have realized due to everything that happened and what the world needs now, we need financial institutions in order to fight injustice, inequality, which will create a huge social problem for all of us. Because we live in a world where you actually have to be richer by the day in order to have a chance to get richer. And the middle class is just falling off like hell all over the world, all over the world. It's a dramatic movement. And if the financial system doesn't adapt to that and try to fight it, we're useless.
All right, so we have the financial system that basically banks cannot afford to make this total radical change that is needed.
They have to be able to afford.
Sorry?
They have to be able to afford.
To afford it, but it's a process. It's not something that's...
It's a process, but one of the things, the difference between Europe and the US is, Europe is 80% financed by banks and 20% by capital markets. The US is 80% financed by capital markets and 20% by banks. So the large US banks play a much smaller role in the US than the banking system plays in Europe. I don't want to go the American way, but what we need is politicians to create an environment that will allow a system where we have 50% banks and 50% capital markets. Then Europe would be a lot healthier than...
And I agree on the private side, and you've been... I'm sorry, I'm just taking over, but I just need to know this. You're doing this part on the private investment and moving investors. I'm running the Angel Investor Association and on the European level, and I see the changes that are happening and more people that are investing into innovation, into early stage entrepreneurs are changing the mindset and moving more into really not necessarily what we call impact, but more conscious investing, definitely.
That's
and
right.
you are moving there bigger monies in that. How successful do you see that, and what do we, how can we support it?
Well, first, maybe just one more comment towards banks, because there are, ethical banks, and the value-based banking movement is a small movement in the big banking area, but Triodos Bank and GLS Bank and about 40 others, have committed to transparency and ethical principles, and they're gaining traction with people who care about that they know what they do with their money. And so there's already some movement going on, and I think the main banks will also be forced to at least be offering more than ESG products in order to enable their clients to go into impact. And so both are necessary, pure plays and enhancing the existing system, right? And so you're talking about a portfolio approach, which, I'm a co-founder of Tonic, that is a global network of private impact investors. And there in that network, we have about 500 investors right now, with a capacity of about 15 billion of capital towards impact, right? And there's about half of us in Europe, about half of us 40% in Europe, 40% in North America, and 20% in Asia. So it's a global movement. And what we see in that one, to answer your question, is that the asset allocation in a 100% portfolio usually has some percentage in liquidity and public equities. But because in public equities, it's very hard to say that you're impactful because you're just betting on the market casino to drive you up. The majority of asset classes of 100% portfolios is actually in non-liquid private equity and real assets and commodities and structured debt, where you actually bake the impact into the term sheet, ideally, right? And so if you have an exit on the structured debt, then you usually have it based on impact criteria as well as business criteria and financial criteria. How successful have we been on that? There's little data out there except for, 100% portfolios. Our foundation has been one of the first ones to document its impact in the language of the old dying financial system, using benchmarks of that system where we compare our real assets to commodities that draw in gold and oil and all that, and we still beat them because the time is right now to beat them, but we don't have the new benchmarks, right? And somebody mentioned about systemic change. It's very difficult if the old system collapses. I agree. We need to maintain the old system until we get the new system off the grounds. And then the asset classes that are naturally more inclined for deeper impact are the non-liquid ones. And we're seeing some good results on that, but not to the level where it's visible to the Goldman Sachs. Even so, they're buying out impact companies. Make no mistake about that, right? Which is a danger. So if the old system buys us all out because they are offering good money now for impact because they know it's the trend, right? Then they're swallowing it up, and then not much will change. And I'm worried about that, to enable pure play impact intermediaries to prosper, including the consultants and the advisors and all that. Europe is just at the beginning of developing that infrastructure.
I want to go deeper into this because actually we have one of the questions of our audiences who says the most important thing to them is how investors employ the assets that they have. Is it ethical investment? And they want to add to that and say how to arrange the cooperation of the financial sector and entrepreneurs that would encourage impact investing. I know you're already talking about this, but I want to open it up to the rest of our speakers and also to our audience. If there's still someone who would like to join us on stage, Markus, please come up. We have Markus Raunig from Austrian Startups joining us and sharing his reflections. Welcome, Markus.
Thanks for having me. Maybe first you want to answer the question, and then I have another one.
Well, I think we talked about portfolio and the progression into impact is that first you detoxify your portfolio, get out of what actually is bad for your health and your values. The next one is you go into ESG because that's safe and you can make some money in liquid. And the third one is you go deeper into impact with what your values are and what you care about with somebody who cares about the similar values. And then you don't apply the old metrics anymore, you don't apply the old standards anymore because they don't serve you on that portion of your portfolio. And in the 100% community, which is about half of the Tonic members, there is what we call a reverse carve-out. About 30% of the portfolios of 100%ers are not measuring themselves against the modern portfolio theory anymore because it doesn't work for us.
I fully agree with Charly. One issue, the speed at which you detoxify your portfolio is incredibly important for investors as well as for banks. Now, one thing we should, however, consider, and that's another European problem, if we want to put, and I think we should put as a clear priority environment, and if we want to detoxify our portfolios environmentally, we cannot do that at the same time claim that we can only detoxify our portfolios environmentally under taking care of the social circumstances. If we take care of the social circumstances, we are not going to be fast enough. That's something that Europeans struggle a lot with. Everything we do, everything we make, has to be done under consideration of the social consequences. If we detoxify the portfolios fast, it will have partially dramatic social consequences, particularly in countries like Romania.
And I have to say we are doing every year European asset allocation survey. Two important results. ESG is driven by regulatory. It's still the case. Even this year it's going to be an outcome. And this year we included a question about impact. And the Nordics are looking a bit more on impact. But overall, I would say it's still not a topic. So I think we might play in the financial industry, with the term risk. Because usually when you take a risk in a discussion, people are listening to you. Because what the financial institutions don't like is risk. So I think the discussion going forward when it comes to impact, we have to link it with risk. What's going to happen to your portfolio if you don't look on the positive and negative impact? And by the way, I like that because I think Charly is, because I'm also always taking negative and positive impact. It's not only about, putting, I'm a pro-climate, so I'm reducing my emissions. You have also to understand what's the negative impact of your investment.
And one more comment on that, because risk is what the financial industry understands, but it understands it wrongly today, right?
Absolutely.
And so we need to incorporate risks that are not showing up on your balance sheet, right? And that's reputational risk, it's impact risk, and which has a huge dramatic impact potentially on the share price, right? And so if we could actually agree on that and start talking about how to manage that between impact investors and the old economy, then we would be aligned, right? And I see some inkling on that, even on the private equity side, where they're not impact investors, but they understand that if they don't take impact risk seriously, that they have an exposure to all of their constituencies, including the people that they hire, including the people that they serve, including the people that they need to raise money from. And that's a good trend. Even so, I don't like fear-based stuff. I would much rather have them contribute because they want to make a positive contribution to the planet. But they're really fearful that they lose, right? Which is okay to start out with.
I have a short intervention, a short question, actually, because following the conversation, I'm not very sure if the solution we see is like radically changing the game, the economic game that we are playing, or just keeping the game and changing within the same game, changing how we redefine value, how we redefine risk, but keeping practically the same,
Well,
the
ESG,
same game.
ESG is
so
within the game, right?
That's what I'm wondering. Like, what is the solution? Radically changing the game, or just changing within the same game, how we redefine things?
It's both. You need to do ESG because of liquidity constraints and financial return expectations, and you need to do the opposite.
And that's an interesting quote. If you cannot change the game, then change the rules to win the game. And I think I like this one. So we can still play the game, change the rules to get the results we are looking for. So.
Here now.
Finally.
I actually want to go back to Europe because I can really relate to what you said before about Europe not realizing how much in trouble we actually are at the moment. And I think there are politicians who realize that too. I was last week at President Macron in Paris, and he very much cares about entrepreneurship and technological sovereignty of Europe, and I think he understands that something needs to change here. At the same time, to reference what Charly said at the beginning, I have the feeling at the moment we are maybe a bit too brainy here, because we're giving the same recommendations now for years. Again and again, we're giving the same thing. You need to change that, and you need to change that, and they take that, and then Macron came out with the statement that his goal is that until 2013, we need to have at least 10 100 billion tech companies in Europe. And for me, that's something very abstract, where most of the society can't really relate to it. And I think one of the main goals here needs to be that everybody in Europe can relate to where we want to go here. And if you look at America and what they maybe really managed to leverage in the last century, was, I believe, the moon mission, the moon shot. It was something where Kennedy, he said, we do that not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And it's something that was probably for most people, it wasn't really imaginable to put the man on the moon. And it created a common understanding, a common vision for the future. And I think it also made technology as a lever much more tangible for everybody. So my question would be, what do you think could be the European moonshot? What could we set as a vision? What could we set as a goal for us so that every part of the society can actually relate to it?
Quite frankly, from my point of view, there is no moonshot. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of little shots, which makes it so difficult. So let's just simply say what we have. We lost a little bit during the last 15 years, but it's still not so bad. Europe is not a bad place. Probably the most comfortable place to live. And actually a place where you ain't gonna run into the Silicon Valley problem soon, because most of Europe has a chance to be a Silicon Valley. It's really nice to live in Vienna. It's really nice to live in Berlin. There are so many incredibly nice places in Europe to live with great environments that would practically offer everything that a young entrepreneurial community would like to have. Great cafes, great everything, great environment, quick move from city to the countryside, easy lifestyle and everything else. What we don't have is entrepreneurship. We have a shitty tax system. We have a tax system that's abominable for young entrepreneurs. We have regulation up to our ears. We have no capital markets. People are poor. And we need to change all those things. And we know we need to change all those things. Why do we not change all those things? Yes? I've seen 560 pages on just the subject of capital markets. We know exactly what to do. Why don't we do it? Because of our political system and because we don't get the support to do that. That's why excuse me, again, I'm going back to the point. It's people like you who have to make clear that this is so important for our future. That you can actually put it in a very simple way. If we don't manage to turn Europe into a place where young people from the United States, from Latin America, from Asia want to go, not because it's nice to live, but it's just a really great place to work. If we don't manage that, you can forget us. And you have to, basically, we together have to start really working hard on that. Because we have everything laid out, but our moonshot is 5,000 nitty-gritty things that we need to change. And we need to find a way on how we can get politicians in Brussels and in the national states together to realize that's the chance of their life to take care that those things will actually happen.
Absolutely. I just want to say, I think it's a great point to end on soon. Please, Alexis, add to this.
Yeah,
we see how many conversations still need to be had, and we want to continue having them.
I thought it's not a good place to end at, actually, because I feel we got very Eurocentric. And I see Alois in the audience, and I thought maybe we can have for the last, so that we enlarge a bit, like going, of course we have US, but and we went very Euro-focused, but maybe we have another perspective. Alois was born in Zimbabwe and is currently working for the UNIDO, so maybe you can share a bit, how do you see what we've been talking here? How does it look from your perspective?
You don't have to put on your jacket. I'm the only one.
You're the only one.
You can take off your mask.
Thank you. I wasn't prepared to
No.
say something, but that is,
We are spontaneous.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks for the invite. And what we are also seeing, especially in developing countries, where we trying to promote secularity and climate change, and perhaps climate action, is the fact that most of the systems are not yet logged into. The technologies are not yet logged into these systems. There's a lot of opportunity to innovate, to support entrepreneurs, to to talk to banks because some of the banks, although they have sort of they're anchored here in Europe, they perceive the situation on the ground differently. We are also seeing a lot of venture capital funds that are sort of based in Europe, but also based in US, also making inroads in developing countries. Their perception of risk is something else, and also their interest to sort of to scale up is too sort of something to talk about. But there is emerging interest, and I think the dynamism that comes from this kind of exchange is actually very important to connect with some of those emerging issues in emerging economies, because there's a lot of potential out there. Given the fact that some of the issues that we are talking about, circular economy, climate change, are not only Eurocentric, but are global issues. There are really a business opportunity to engage with some of the entrepreneurs, investors, and some of the early stage companies that are coming from developing countries. One of the programs that we are running is try and make projects in climate and clean energy interesting to investors from Europe. We have, I think, by early June, we are celebrating that we have mobilized around $2 billion into climate change projects. That is coming from some of the, the investors are from Europe and from US. So there's a lot of, opportunity to engage also some of the emerging economies, some of developing countries, so that some of the global problems are not only solved, like we are now climate neutral, but it doesn't mean much if Europe becomes climate neutral and and then we transport some of our emissions to some of these emerging countries. So there is really a business opportunities. Of course, there is interest from to leverage public resources, but there's pure business opportunity in developing countries to also invest, but also to co-innovation, joint ventures in climate change, in clean energy options in developing countries. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for closing us out on this global perspective, which I absolutely agree it's crucial to have. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your perspectives. A big thank you also to our virtual and our live audience for either coming up on stage and sharing your thoughts on Slido. But after all these perspectives, there's one more that I would really like to add to the mix, and that is from Carmencita Nada, the head of social banking at Erste Bank.
My dear impact drivers, I have the great pleasure of, together with you, taking a look into the future and what is to come in the next weeks and months. Looking back, only very briefly, I think the past 1.5 years have been hard, they have been crazy for all of us, and they have taken a toll on all of us. But then again, times of crises like these are also times of great change. And I don't know if you feel it like I do, but alone in the last couple of weeks, I have been feeling this strange sensation, this buzz. It makes my skin tingle, actually. So there's so much going on, and it makes me giddy. I'm feeling a little bit anxious, you might feel it. But it also makes me feel a very, very strong optimism about good things that are to come for all of us. And a lot of this feeling is based upon the fact that I have the pleasure of having the possibility to exchange on a regular basis with many of you. And I hear the many ideas and innovations, not the ones only that you have already started implementing throughout the crisis. I mean, there has been a lot of progress, obviously, on the medical side, on the environmental side, and there has also been a lot of social initiative. But I see that many of us are now in their starting blocks to really bring their ideas into action. And this is why I am particularly happy that finally, after a small pause, we will be now meeting again in September, not only virtually, but also physically, during the Impact Days of 2021. And in line with the manifold challenges that we have been seeing over the past months and years, there are also a lot of possible solutions. And we have tried to structure a little bit the topics that we want to tackle together with you. There's on one hand the issue of climate transition. And climate transition is impacting each and every one of us. And it makes me even happier to say that now, although there has obviously been movement also throughout the past couple of years, but now is the first time in my life that I see private individuals, public institutions, and also private corporations working together on one side and trying to actively tackle climate change. I also see and I hear that many of you have smaller and bigger solutions that they would like to implement. And I'm looking forward to this exchange, and I'm looking forward to learning with and from you. Another point that has become even more important than ever is the question on how we can make societies more resilient in the medium and long term. There has been a lot of movement and a lot of traction in civil society. We have seen new ideas popping up. We have seen people working together, strengthening each other, believing in each other to get through this crisis. And I think this is some sort of momentum that we have to use now. This is a foundation we can build upon and that we must build upon. And ultimately, it's the big question for all of us, because in a way we're all impact innovators, but we also have different roles. There are innovators in the narrowest sense, and then there are supporters, there are investors, there are banks like us, and other stakeholders. And it is the question for us and how we can strengthen each other, how we can believe in each other, in our ideas, and in ourselves, and what levers we have to use now to realize and strengthen the ideas that we have. Esther has had a strong partnership with the Impact Hub now for many years, a partnership that I personally value very, very much. And I'm looking forward to our ventures to come. I am also, because some of you might know, this is the first time that in my new role I will be participating in the Impact Days. And I am looking forward very much to co-welcome you together with my partners. I'm looking forward to exchanging ideas with you. I'm looking forward to listening to you. And I am looking forward to celebrating with you this time of change, this time of leadership, because we will lead together into a new and more prosperous, more environmentally friendly, and more societally resilient future. Have a lovely day, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in person in September.
Thank you, Carmencita. If it's your first time, it's going to be also a first time for me not being there, at least not on stage. We will invite you for the Impact Days in September on the 9th and 10th, again live at the hybrid stage here at the Impact Hub. But we also invite you to the Impact Days already now for the June 22 event, which will happen on the 2nd and 3rd of June next year. The one that Angelika and me and all of our team are actually dreaming about. This is the version at Hofburg, where we can actually invite all the different people again from the CE region, from the DACH region, from Europe, who knows, maybe from Africa or from wherever Alois is from, and all the other global citizens that we would like to join for, that we would like joining us for these conversations. So, in order to co-create actually the next Impact Days, we invite you to also share your thoughts about what we should talk about. I think there were so many talking points today. You should just add some of the bits and pieces that you would like to continue to talk about on Slido. So the link will stay open and you can actually share whoever you would like to see what we should discuss and give us your inputs. So the Impact Days in September will host more reflections and more conversations that really matter. It's personal. So I'm inviting you to join us. I hope you enjoyed the live event here at the Impact Hub and or online. Enjoy your summer and have a nice day.